The Grand Synod of the Ethelgardian hegemony did not merely occupy a room. It occupied a suspended anomaly of crystallized light, a spherical chamber that floated within the upper atmosphere of their capital world, Xylos. The walls were not made of metal or stone, but of solidified photonic lattices that hummed with the collective psychic resonance of 1,000 tributary species. To stand within the synod was to stand inside a living jewel, where the refraction of the binary suns outside painted the interior in shifting hues of violet, gold, and cerulean. It was a place of silence, of contemplation, and of absolute, terrifying judgment. Here, the High Arbiters decided the fate of star systems with the detached elegance of a gardener pruning a withered branch. But today, the silence was brittle. The air, usually scented with the calming pheromones of the ruling caste, tasted of ozone and anxiety. The immense circular table, carved from a single piece of white neutronium, was crowded with holograms and flickering data streams, but the eyes of the counselors were not on the data. They were on the dark void projected in the center of the chamber, a tactical simulation of the outer rim. High Arbiter Valnas, a being of tall, slender grace with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with a soft, bioluminescent blue, tapped a long, six-fingered hand against the table. The sound rang out like a struck chime, silencing the murmurs of the gathered delegates. Valnas was old, even by the standards of his near-immortal race. He had seen the rise of the hegemony, the purification of the core sectors, and the silencing of the dissonant aggressive species that refused to kneel to the great harmony. He valued beauty above all else, beauty in form, beauty in thought, beauty in the mathematical perfection of a fleet moving in synchronization. What he was being asked to consider now was an insult to that beauty. It was an aberration. "It is a waste of our time," Valnas said, his voice a melodic vibration that resonated in the chest cavities of everyone present. "We face the encroachment of the Voidborn, a scourge that devours light and logic alike. Our fleets are stretched thin across the Perseus arm. Our shields fracture under the weight of their chaotic energies, and you suggest we call upon them, the primates, the mud-dwellers from the Sol system." He waved a hand dismissively at a data pad hovering near his shoulder. "I have seen their dossier. They are young. They are crude. They burn dead plants for fuel in their infancy and fracture atoms with no regard for the song of the universe. To invite them here is to invite dirt into a sterile operating theater." Across the table, Fleetmaster Xyrus shifted in his gravity harness. Unlike Valnas, Xyrus was a creature of war, armored in a shimmering biosuit that acted as a second skin. His species, the Crawl, had served as the hegemony's enforcers for cycles beyond counting. He was less concerned with aesthetics and more concerned with the fact that 3 of his carrier groups had recently been reduced to drifting vapor by the Voidborn. Xyrus let out a low growl, a sound like grinding tectonic plates. "You speak of dirt, Arbiter, but dirt is solid. Dirt endures. The Voidborn do not care for our poetry or our crystalline hulls. They shatter us because we are rigid. The Terrans, they are different. I have studied their skirmishes in the uncontrolled zones. They do not fight with grace. They fight with a desperate, terrifying persistence." "Persistence is the virtue of the insect," Valnas countered smoothly. "We are the gardeners. We do not ally with the aphids." "The aphids might be the only ones with a shell thick enough to choke the pestilence," Xyrus retorted. "We sent the summons. They accepted. They are already in transit. To turn them away now would be a diplomatic error, assuming they even understand the concept of diplomacy. Their transmission was unstructured, no formal preamble, no harmonic alignment code, just a binary pulse acknowledging the coordinates." A third voice joined the fray, soft and chittering. It came from Scholar Alara, a representative of the scientific caste, a small, avian creature perched on a floating disk. Her large, multifaceted eyes whirred as they focused on Valnas. "It is not just their behavior that is troubling, High Arbiter. It is their technology. Our sensors struggle to classify it. It does not emit the standard tachyon signatures of civilized spacefaring nations. It radiates heat, entropy. It is inefficient, leaking radiation like a wounded beast. Yet their velocity curves suggest they are traveling faster than our theoretical models for such primitive engines should allow. It is a paradox. They are flying a contradiction." Valnas sighed, the light in his eyes dimming slightly. "A contradiction, a mess. Very well, let them come. Let them present their fleet to the Synod. We shall look upon their works, offer a polite dismissal, and perhaps grant them a mercy colony in the buffer zone before the Voidborn consume their home world. It is the benevolent thing to do, but do not expect me to take them seriously." The chamber fell silent again as the proximity alarms chimed. It was a soft, harmonious sound, usually signaling the arrival of a sleek diplomatic cruiser or a trade barge. But the holographic display in the center of the room shifted, zooming in on the edge of the Xylos system, past the orbital defense grid, past the shimmering aesthetic minefields that guarded the capital. Space twisted. It did not fold neatly, as it did for hegemony warp drives, slipping through the fabric of reality like a needle through silk. This was a tear, a rupture. Reality seemed to scream as something forced its way into the system, dragging a wake of Cherenkov radiation and gravitational distortion that set the sensor networks ablaze with error warnings. "By the light," Ilara whispered, her feathers puffing up in alarm. "The gravitational displacement, it is massive, a planetoid, no, a vessel." Out of the tear in space, the human ship emerged. The Grand Synod stared. In a society where starships were grown from living crystal, shaped like teardrops, feathers, or spheres of perfect geometric proportions, the Terran vessel was a horror. It was a block, a colossal rectangular slab of dark, unpainted metal. There were no graceful curves, no glowing nacelles, no elegant fins. It looked like a city block ripped from the ground and welded to an asteroid, then beaten with hammers until it vaguely resembled a weapon. The hull was pockmarked, scarred, and stained with the residue of cosmic dust and engine exhaust. Massive bundles of cables and pipes ran along the exterior like exposed veins. The engines, if they could be called that, were gaping maws of fire at the rear, spewing a dirty, iron-rich exhaust that polluted the pristine vacuum of the Xylos system. It was ugly. It was industrial. It was a piece of junk. "Is that," Valnos struggled to find the words, his aesthetic sensibilities physically revolted. "Is that their flagship?" "It is their only ship," Zyra said, reading the sensor data, his mandibles clicking in confusion. "One vessel. The registry code identifies it as the USC Hephaestus. I'm reading no shield harmonics, no energy barriers. The hull is. By the stars, the hull is just metal. Layers and layers of dense physical matter. Tungsten, titanium, carbon nanotube weaves. It's primitive armor. If the Voidborn hit them, they won't even need to overload their shields. They will just tear through that metal like paper." The human ship drifted closer, its maneuvering thrusters firing with bursts of chemical propellant that looked like puffs of dirty smoke against the backdrop of the stars. It did not glide. It lumbered. It felt heavy, even in the vacuum. It blocked out the light of the distant stars as it approached the orbital station, a looming monolith of rust and gray. "Open a channel," Valnos commanded, his voice dripping with disdain. "Let us hear the captain of this. Refuse barge apologize for polluting our sky." The view screen flickered. There was no high-definition holographic avatar, no perfected digital representation of the speaker. Instead, a 2D video feed crunched into existence, grainy and slightly desaturated. The figure on the screen was a human male, seated in a chair that looked as utilitarian as his ship. He wore a uniform of dark gray, unadorned save for a small emblem on the collar. He was old, his face lined with the deep grooves of stress and fatigue, his hair cropped short and gray. There was a scar running from his jawline to his ear. He held a physical cup in his hand containing a dark liquid. He looked tired. He looked bored. "This is Captain Vance of the United Sol Command Vessel Hephaestus," the human said. His voice was gravelly, transmitted through a microphone that clipped the lower frequencies. "We received your invitation. We're here to discuss the threat." Valnos straightened his posture, projecting an aura of regal superiority. "Captain Vance, I'm High Arbiter Valnos of the Ethelgard. You stand, or rather float, before the Grand Synod. We expected a fleet, a representation of your species' military might. Instead, you bring us a single vessel that appears to be in varying states of disrepair. Is this a jest, or is this truly the pinnacle of Terran engineering?" On the screen, Vance took a sip from his cup. He didn't seem intimidated. He didn't even seem impressed by the crystalline splendor of the alien council visible in the background of Valnos's transmission. "Not a jest, Arbiter. The Hephaestus is sufficient. We don't believe in parades. We believe in results. You have a problem on your borders. The Voidborn, we've tracked them. We know what they are." "You know what they are," Scholar Ilara interjected, her voice shrill. "We have studied the Voidborn for 1,000 cycles. They are manifestations of anti-reality, chaotic entities that defy physics. What could a species that builds ships out of welded scrap possibly understand about higher-dimensional warfare?" Vance's eyes shifted to the avian scholar. There was a glint there, not of anger, but of a deep, weary amusement. "We know they're hungry, and we know they don't like resistance, your ships. They're pretty, very shiny. We saw the wreckage of your 7th Fleet in the Antares sector. Beautiful debris, glittering in the dark but dead. You fight them with light, you fight them with energy. You try to harmonize with the universe. The Void-born eat harmony. They feed on your shields, they drink your lasers. And you propose to fight them with? Rust, Valna scoffed. Your vessel has no shields, Captain. Our scanners show your hull is covered in microfractures. You leak radiation. You are barely space-worthy. If we allowed you to engage the enemy, you would be vaporized in seconds. This meeting is a mistake. We sought allies, not a salvage operation. Vance set the cup down. He leaned forward. The camera auto-focused on his eyes. They were hard, cold, and flinty. It's not rust, Arbiter, it's ablation, and we don't use shields because shields are a beacon. You light yourselves up like a campfire in a dark forest and wonder why the wolves come. We don't shine, we endure, but if you want us to leave, say the word. We'll turn around, we'll go back to Saul. And when the Void-born finish eating your glass palaces, maybe they'll be full by the time they get to us. Or maybe not, but we won't die looking pretty. The insolence was breathtaking. Valnos opened his mouth to order the humans to depart, to banish this floating brick from his system, when the red alert sirens began to scream. The ambient light in the Synod chamber turned to a pulsing crimson. The holographic map in the center of the table expanded violently, red icons flooding the system edge. Incursion, Fleetmaster Xyrus roared, his hands flying across his tactical interface. Massive warp breaches. It is the Void-born. They are here. How? The sensor buoys gave no warning. They masked their approach. Vance's voice came from the screen, calm and steady amidst the panic. They rode the wake of our arrival. They knew you'd be looking at us, laughing at the junk ship and not watching your blind spots. Clever bastards. Deploy the home fleet, Valnos shouted, his composure shattering. All batteries fire, protect the capital. Through the transparent walls of the station, the delegates watched as the Ethel Guardian armada mobilized. It was a magnificent sight. Thousands of sleek crystalline warships ascended from the planet's orbit, their hulls glowing with golden energy. They moved in perfect unison, a swarm of angels rising to meet the darkness. Beams of coherent light, pure and devastating, lashed out into the void. And then the darkness answered. The Void-born ships were not ships in the traditional sense. They were shifting clouds of shadows, jagged spikes of non-matter that absorbed light. They moved with a jerky, unnatural speed. When the golden beams of the Ethelgard fleet struck them, the energy didn't detonate. It was absorbed. The Void-born vessels glowed briefly, feeding on the attack, and then returned fire with lances of purple entropy. The massacre was immediate. The elegant shields of the Ethelgardian ships flickered and died, shattered by energies they couldn't calculate. Hulls made of diamond-hard crystal shattered like glass. Explosions blossomed in silence across the high orbit. One by one, the pride of the hegemony was turned into drifting dust. They are adapting, Xyrus yelled, watching his kin die by the thousands. Our frequencies are useless. They are bypassing our armor. We cannot stop them. Captain Vance, Valna screamed at the screen, desperation stripping away his arrogance. Your ship, you are in the line of fire. Flee, save yourselves. On the screen, Vance hadn't moved. He was watching a tactical display off-camera. We're not going anywhere. Helm, rotate us. 40 degrees port. Present the broadside. Are you mad? Alara cried. You have no shields. You will be destroyed. Shields are for people who plan on getting hit and hoping it doesn't hurt, Vance muttered. We plan on getting hit and not caring. Outside, the Hephaestus began to turn. It was agonizingly slow. The massive slab of metal pivoted, placing itself directly between the Void-born swarm and the vulnerable Synod station. A group of 3 Void-born destroyers broke off from the slaughter of the Ethelgard fleet and dove toward the human ship. They fired. Bolts of purple entropy, capable of unmaking matter at an atomic level, slammed into the side of the Hephaestus. The Synod held its breath, expecting the ugly ship to vanish. The beams hit, the metal scorched, debris flew, chunks of outer plating, antennae, rusted gantries. The ship shuddered violently. But it did not explode. Hull breach on decks 4, 9, and 12, Vance's voice said, sounding like he was reading a grocery list. Seal the bulkheads, vent the damaged sections, reroute power to the main coil. They survived, Valnos whispered, staring at the sensor readings. How? That volley vaporized a dreadnought of the Royal Guard. Density, Xyrus breathed, his warrior's eye widening. Look at the scans, that ship. It is not hollow. It is not a shell with crew quarters and luxury halls. It is a solid block of honeycombed armor meters thick. The crew compartments are buried deep in the center. The outer hull is designed to die. It is ablative armor on a scale we never considered. They built a mountain and put engines on it. The Hephaestus was burning, its outer layers glowing cherry red from the impacts. It looked like a floating cinder, but it was still there, and now it was angry. "Target lock established," Vance said. "Fire solution plotted. Let's show them what a piece of junk can do. Main batteries, open." The transformation of the Hephaestus was a mechanical nightmare to behold. The smooth-ish, rusted flanks of the ship retracted. Massive hydraulic plates groaned and shifted, sliding back to reveal the dark inner workings of the vessel. It wasn't energy weapons that emerged. There were no graceful laser emitters. Instead, hundreds of dark, rifled barrels extended. Missile tubes the size of skyscrapers opened. The ship bristled with kinetic weaponry, ancient, brutal, and ugly. "Railguns," Alara gasped. "They are using magnetic acceleration projectile weapons. That technology is obsolete by 5,000 cycles." "Physics never goes obsolete," Vance said. "Fire." The Hephaestus shuddered as it unleashed hell. It didn't fire beams of light. It fired slugs of ferric tungsten, each weighing hundreds of tons, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. It fired swarms of nuclear-tipped missiles that didn't care about frequencies or shield modulation. It was a storm of solid matter. The Voidborn, adapted to absorb and deflect energy, were unprepared for a brick thrown at their face. The tungsten slugs slammed into the shadowy ships. There was no absorption. Kinetic energy transfer is absolute. The Voidborn ships crumpled. They shattered. They were torn apart by the sheer momentum of the human assault. The nuclear warheads detonated inside the enemy formations, miniature suns that burned with radiation the Voidborn couldn't eat fast enough. They are winning," Valnos stammered. The beautiful Ethelgard fleet was scattering, but the ugly human brick was wading into the center of the enemy's swarm, taking hit after hit, shedding armor like a gladiator shedding blood, and dealing out catastrophic damage in return. "We need to close the distance," Vance's voice crackled. The bridge of the Hephaestus was shaking visibly now, sparks were flying behind him. "Helm ramming speed." "Ramming speed," Xyrus roared. "You cannot ram a Voidborn, their touch is death." "Only if you touch them with something you want to keep," Vance replied. The Hephaestus ignited its main thrusters, the dirty iron plumes turning into blinding columns of white fire. The massive ship surged forward, straight into the heart of the largest Voidborn mothership. The enemy vessel tried to evade, tried to fire its entropy beams, but the Hephaestus was too heavy, too fast, and too stubborn. The collision was silent in the void, but the shockwave registered on the planetary seismometers below. The squared-off prow of the human ship, reinforced with meters of hyperdense alloy, smashed into the Voidborn flagship. It crumpled the alien vessel, drove deep into its shadowy core, and kept going. The Hephaestus effectively gored the enemy, breaking its spine. "Detonate the forward charges," Vance ordered. The front section of the human ship, the junk nose cone, blew apart. It was a shaped charge, a directional nuclear blast directed inward into the enemy ship. The Voidborn flagship disintegrated. The Hephaestus drifted out of the debris cloud. It was a wreck. The front third of the ship was gone, fires burned in a dozen sections. It was listing. It looked more like a piece of junk than ever. But the Voidborn were retreating. Their leader dead, their immunity to energy weapons useless against the kinetic brutality of the humans, they fled back into the dark tiers of space. Silence returned to the Grand Synod. The holographic map cleared, the red icons vanished. Valnos stared at the drifting hulk of the human ship. He looked at the perfect, pristine ships of his own fleet, now reduced to glittering dust. He looked at the Hephaestus, ugly, broken, and victorious. "Open the channel," Valnos whispered. His voice was trembling. Vance appeared on the screen. He was wiping blood from a cut on his forehead with a rag. The bridge behind him was a mess of smoke and activity, but the crew moved with calm, practiced efficacy. "NCY." "Captain Vance," Valnos said, bowing his head low, a gesture he had never performed for a non-ethel guardian. You have saved us. We owe you a debt that cannot be calculated." "Don't mention it," Vance grunted. "Just doing the job." "Your ship," Xyrus asked, his voice filled with reverence. "It is ruined. You have lost your bow. Your armor is stripped. How will you repair it? Vance chuckled a dry, raspy sound. Repair it? Fleetmaster, that's the beauty of the Hephaestus. We didn't lose anything we can't replace. We'll weld some hull plates from your wrecked ships onto the front, patch the leaks, and she'll be good as new. Ugly as sin, but functional. But why? Alara asked, her scientific mind reeling. Why build it this way? You have FTL, you have gravity manipulation, you could build ships of light like ours. Why build a tomb? Vance leaned back, looking at the alien council with a sudden, deep sadness. The bravado faded, replaced by the weight of a history the aliens couldn't comprehend. Because we learned a long time ago, Vance said softly, that the universe isn't a garden, it's not a song. It's a dark, cold room full of things that want to kill you. You build ships of glass and light because you think you can tame the dark. You think if you're perfect enough, the universe will respect you. He gestured around his bridge at the exposed pipes, the manual controls, the grim industrial reality of humanity. We know better. We know that when the lights go out and the shields fail and the fancy computers die, all you have left is metal and will. We build our ships like this because we expect to lose. We expect to bleed. And we build them so that even when we're beaten, broken, and dying, we can still take the enemy with us. Valnos looked at the human. He saw the scars. He saw the crude uniform. And for the first time, he didn't see a primitive. He saw a survivor. He saw a species that had looked into the abyss and instead of blinking, had built a fortress to punch it in the face. We underestimated you, Valnos admitted. We thought you were scavengers. We did not realize you were. Warriors, Zyrus finished. They are the shield, the wall. We're just the janitors, Vance said, finishing his cold coffee. We clean up the messes. Now about that alliance, we're going to need resupply and a lot of tungsten. You shall have it, Valnos promised. You shall have all of it. As the diplomatic channels opened for logistics, Scholar Alara remained focused on her datapad. She was analyzing the readings from the moment the Hephaestus had rammed the enemy. There was an anomaly, a spike in the energy signature that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't from the nuclear detonation. It was from the core of the human ship. Captain, Alara said, her voice hesitant. I am reading something peculiar deep inside your vessel. When you accelerated, the mass of your ship did not correlate with the materials on the hull. It was infinite. Vance stopped. The room on the screen went quiet. The human captain looked at the small avian scholar, and for a second the mask of the weary soldier slipped, revealing something far more ancient and terrifying. You have good eyes, Scholar, Vance said quietly. That is not a reactor powering your ship, is it? Alara whispered. The radiation leak, it isn't from inefficiency, it is Hawking radiation. The Grand Synod froze, Hawking radiation, the byproduct of a black hole, Valnos breathed. You have a singularity on board. Not just on board, Vance said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a collapsing star. The Hephaestus isn't a warship, counselors, it's a cage. The humans weren't just using crude nuclear engines. They had captured a micro-singularity, a tear in the fabric of spacetime, and they were using it to pull their ship through the universe. The junk exterior wasn't just armor against enemy fire. It was heavy shielding to keep the crew from being spaghettified by the monster they had chained in the basement. You harness the Devourer of Worlds to power your engines? Zyrus asked, horrified and awed. We needed the energy, Vance shrugged, and it makes for a hell of a self-destruct mechanism if things go really wrong. The revelation hung in the air. The humans didn't just survive the dark. They had harnessed it. They traveled with a monster in their hold, riding the edge of oblivion every time they engaged their drive. The piece of junk was the most dangerous object in the galaxy, a containment vessel for a cosmic apocalypse, piloted by apes who drank cold coffee and didn't care about aesthetics. The Voidborn, Alara realized, connecting the dots. They weren't attacking you, they were drawn to it, to the singularity. Yeah, Vance admitted. We're the bait, we lure them out, we let them think we're weak, and then we crush them with the gravity of our own sins. Valnos looked out the window, at the scarred, ugly, magnificent brick floating in the void. He realized now that the Ethelgard had been playing with toys while the humans were juggling loaded guns. We have much to discuss, Captain, Valnos said, his tone humble. Welcome to the Synod. Thanks, Vance said. Just don't ask us to paint it. The screen cut to black. The silence returned to the Grand Synod, but it was different now. The crystalline perfection felt fragile. The light felt thinner. They looked at the empty space where the beautiful fleet had been, and then at the iron block that remained. They understood now. The universe was not a place of light. It was a place of crushing dark. And the only thing strong enough to survive it wasn't a jewel. It was a rock. And upon this rock, the Alliance would be built. The humans had arrived, bringing with them the ugly, undeniable truth of survival. And for the first time in 1,000 cycles, the High Arbiter felt something he hadn't felt in ages. He felt safe, because the monster was on their side. End of Act 1 and Act 2. Transition to Act 3, the Deep Dark. Months passed. The alliance between the Ethelgard hegemony and the Terran Union transformed the sector. It was an awkward marriage. The Ethelgard provided the precision, the sensors, the long-range energy grids, and the logistical speed. The humans provided the bricks. The Hephaestus was joined by its sisters, the Prometheus, the Atlas, the Cain. They were all the same, massive, ugly, rectangular slabs of armor wrapped around caged singularities. The war against the Voidborn shifted. No longer were the Ethelgard slaughtered in their glass ships. Now the human fleets acted as the anvil, absorbing the blows, drawing the enemy in with the gravitational lure of their singularity cores, holding the line with stubborn refusal to die. Then the Ethelgard would strike from behind, the hammer of light shattering the distracted enemy. But as the war pushed deeper into the unknown regions, toward the source of the Voidborn, the nature of the conflict began to change. The fleet sat on the edge of the abyssal rim, a region of space where stars were sparse and the background radiation was strangely silent. The Hephaestus, now sporting patches of golden Ethelgardian alloy welded haphazardly over its scars, led the formation. Ambassador Kale stood on the observation deck of the Ethelgard flagship, the Symphony of Light. He was a retired admiral, a man who spoke little but saw everything. Beside him was High Arbiter Valnas. They had developed a strange friendship, born of mutual necessity and the shared trauma of command. "The silence is heavy here," Valnas observed, his bioluminescence dimming in response to the oppressive atmosphere of the rim. "The Voidborn emerge from this darkness, but our sensors detect nothing, no staging grounds, no planets, just empty space." "It's not empty," Kale said, lighting a tobacco pipe, a habit Valnas had learned to tolerate though the filtration systems complained. "It's just quiet, too quiet." "Scholar Alara believes the Voidborn are not a species," Valnas said. "She believes they are a reaction, an immune response. But to what?" "To us," Kale said, "or maybe to what we carry. The singularities. Bigger than that." The comms crackled. It was Captain Vance from the Hephaestus. "Ambassador, Arbiter, you need to see this. We're picking up a signal. It's not Voidborn, it's old, analog, extremely low frequency." "Source?" Kale asked. "Dead ahead, 0.001 light-years. It's buried in a nebula of cold gas." "Investigate," Valnas ordered, "but proceed with caution." The fleet moved into the nebula. As the gas parted, the sensors cleared, and the Grand Synod, watching remotely from Xylos along with the crews of 1,000 ships, gasped. It wasn't a Voidborn hive. It wasn't a planet. It was a megastructure. A ring, millions of kilometers in diameter, constructed of a material that made the human ships look high-tech. It was ancient stone, bound together with gravity fields that had long since decayed. It was shattered, broken, drifting. And floating in the center of the ring was a ship. It was colossal. It dwarfed the Hephaestus. It was a jagged crystalline spire, beautiful and terrifying, but it was dead, dark, and its design. "It looks like Ethelgardian architecture," Kale noted. Valnas was trembling. "No, it is not Ethelgardian, it is Precursor, the first singers. Our legends say they ascended to a higher plane of existence eons ago. We modeled our ships after their memory." "They didn't ascend," Vance's voice cut in, grim and heavy. "They died." "How can you know that?" "Because," Vance said, "my singularity drive is singing to them, and they're singing back." The Hephaestus moved closer to the dead giant. The human ship's black hole core began to resonate with the derelict. Lights flickered on the ancient spire, not electric lights, but psionic pulses. A voice booming, "ND tragic," filled the minds of every being in the fleet. It wasn't a transmission, it was a memory imprinted on the fabric of space. "We thought we could harmonize the universe. We thought order was the ultimate good. We silenced the chaos. We pruned the unruly. We built the perfect garden." The visual feed showed the ancient spire activating. Holographic records spilled out into the void, giant ghosts replaying the final moments of a civilization. But the universe requires chaos. By enforcing absolute order, by silencing the entropy, we starved the cosmos, the void-born. They are not invaders. They are the starving scavengers of a dying ecosystem. We made them our perfection, created the rot. Valnos collapsed into a chair. The void-born were not monsters. They were the result of the precursor's obsession with order, the same obsession the Ethelgard held. They were the cleanup crew for a galaxy that had become too sterile. We failed, the memory voice wept. We tried to fight them with light, but they ate it. We needed matter. We needed something that could anchor reality against the dissolution, but we had forgotten how to build anything but glass. The message ended. Silence reigned. The truth was a physical blow. The Ethelgard's philosophy, their entire way of life, was the disease. The void-born were the symptoms. We caused this, Valnos whispered, horrified. Our pursuit of perfection, it is killing the galaxy. And we, Kale said, looking at the Hephaestus on the screen, are the cure because we aren't perfect, we are messy. We are chaotic, we are dense. The void-born swarm is reacting, Vance reported. They are emerging from the woodwork, millions of them. They sense the precursor tech waking up. They want to finish the job. We cannot win against that number, Zyrus said, his voice flat. Even with the human ships, it is a tidal wave. We don't need to win, Vance said. We need to reset the balance. How? The ring, Vance said. It's a gate or a stabilizer. The precursors tried to turn it on, but they didn't have the power source. They dealt in light. This machine needs mass, infinite mass. Valnos looked at the screen. You intend to use the singularity. I intend to feed the Hephaestus to the machine, Vance said. We drive the ship into the core of the ring. We unchain the black hole. The gravitational release should jumpstart the stabilizer. It will create a shockwave of reality, re-injecting chaos and mass into this sector. It will wash the void-born away. They can't exist in a universe that is this heavy. But the Hephaestus, Ilara cried. The crew. We'll evacuate to the escape pods, Vance said. Most of us. Someone has to manually release the containment clamps. I'll do it, Vance said. No, Valna stood up. I will go. Kale looked at the alien. You. My people caused this, Valna said, his voice gaining a new strength, not of arrogance but of resolve. We sought perfection and brought ruin. It is time we learned the value of getting our hands dirty. Captain Vance, I am boarding your vessel. I have the psychic resonance to interface with the precursor ring. You have the engine. Together, we can do this. Vance paused. It's a one-way trip, Arbiter. It's ugly in there. I am done with being pretty, Valnos replied. The transfer was made. The battle raged outside. The Ethelgardian fleets, now fighting with a desperate, suicidal fury they had learned from the humans, formed a protective sphere around the ancient ring. They rammed their beautiful ships into the void-born, sacrificing their elegance for time. The Hephaestus, with Captain Vance and High Arbiter Valnos on the bridge, moved toward the center of the ring. Containment dropping to 50%, Vance said. The ship was groaning, the metals screaming as the black hole fought to be free. Valnos stood by the manual release levers. He looked at the human captain. The alien, a creature of light and crystal, and the human, a creature of dirt and blood. It has been an honor, Captain, Valnos said. Likewise, Arbiter, Vance grinned. Let's make some noise. Vance punched the thrusters. Valnos slammed the levers. The Hephaestus entered the ring's core. The containment failed. The black hole expanded. But it didn't consume them. The precursor ring caught the singularity. It channeled the infinite gravity, the infinite weight, and amplified it. A shockwave of pure, heavy existence exploded outward. It wasn't an explosion of fire. It was an explosion of reality. It washed over the sector. The void-born creatures of anti-reality shrieked as they were forced to obey the laws of physics. They solidified. They became brittle. And then, under the crushing weight of a restored universe, they crumbled into dust. The wave passed. The fleet survived. The ring burned out, its job done. In the center, the Hephaestus was gone. Days later, the wreckage was found. It was twisted, fused with the ancient stone of the ring, but it wasn't just scrap. Deep inside the fused metal, a distress beacon beeped. Rescue crews cut through the layers of tungsten and precursor stone. They found the bridge pod, miraculously preserved in a pocket of stable gravity, the eye of the storm. Vance and Valnos were alive, battered, broken, oxygen low, but alive. They found them sitting on the floor of the tilted bridge, sharing the last of Vance's terrible coffee. Valnos looked up as the rescuers burned through the door. His biosuit was scorched, his skin cracked. He looked hideous by Ethel Guardian standards. "You look terrible, High Arbiter," Fleetmaster Zyra said, stepping through the breach. Valnos looked at his reflection in a piece of broken glass. He smiled. It was a crooked, ugly smile. "I know," Valnos said. "Isn't it beautiful?" The Alliance stood firm. The Ethelgard learned to build armor. The humans learned to appreciate the light. And the universe, no longer a sterile garden, grew wild and dangerous and free. And patrolling the borders, ugly, scarred, and terrifying, were the ships of the Union, the junk piles, the most advanced warships ever built, because they were the only ones that could carry the weight of the world.